Hey there, and welcome to the Traveling Homesteader and Gyroscope Farm. Today we're going to be making blueberry pie filling, and we're actually going to be cooking it and canning it. I'm really kind of excited for this one. I've been looking around for one item, so as a heads up, if you're interested in making any kind of pie filling, whether it's blueberry pie filling, apple pie filling, any of that, I'm going with a recipe that I found through my local extension service, the Oregon State University Extension Service Master Food Preservers program. And I'll put the link down below so you guys can see it. In all the fruit pie filling recipes that they call for a product called clear gel. And that is what this is. It's a white powder, very similar to cornstarch, but it's like a refined cornstarch, and it's specific to these types of things. Some people, in looking and talking with people and doing a little bit of research, people think, oh, I can thicken it after I can it, or I can thicken it with cornstarch or tapioca. This particular one is the only product that my extension service suggests to use in these recipes. So that's why I've gone with this, and when I've used it before, it's been great. And in theory, when you go and use these jars, these are ball jars, this is what we're going to put our final product in. Once you put it in here and seal it, it's pie filling. All you have to do is then lay out your pie crust, put this in, put your upper pie crust, and bake it in the oven. That's all you got to do, and it's slick. I've done this before in years past, and I love it. It's a great product. It's simple, it's easy. But one thing I wanted to start out with first, as I mentioned, these are glass jars. You probably can't see it very well, but I'll put a picture in with it too. These are ball jars. And this year and last year, there's been a problem with getting canning jars and lids, but there's two parts. There's this flat part that once sealed to the can will stay, or to the jar, will stay to the jar. This ring is also another item that's been in short supply since the pandemic. So once these two are put on and they put it in the canner, this is what helps seal this metal lid to the glass jar. So this is what has to be in while canning. But once the jars are cooled and we know that there's a seal, and we'll probably hear that in a little bit, this can come off and you can use it again on other jars. You do not keep it on this jar forever. And that's because we want to make sure that if something does not seal appropriately, that it's not disguised and accidentally reseals on its own. We'll see that it's a problem. So the other thing that I wanted to point out is that if you ever have any questions on things that you want to know through the Ball company, Ball canning jars and Kerr canning jars have been around for ages. They're great products. Ball, I believe, bought Kerr, so now no longer is Kerr. But you can find all sorts of good information at ball.com. And that's the only .com site that you'll find good canning recipes on. If you're looking for a specific recipe, you can go to site : the name of your recipe. In this case, we could go to site : blueberry pie filling. And that'll give you a whole listing of a variety of pie fillings, blueberry pie fillings that are good for canning. So site : recipe and ball.com are two really highly recommended sites through at least my extension service, and one that I'll support too. But as we get started on this today, I'll have this recipe attached with other pie filling recipes that I've gotten through my local extension service. But we'll start today with the beginning. So this is 2.5 cups, let me make sure, yes, 2.5 cups of clear gel. Now this clear gel is not clear jello. I want to make sure that's clear. This is a cornstarch, and it's a refined cornstarch, so it's 2.5 cups of clear gel in our pot. Okay, and then what I do is I put in my 6 cups of granulated sugar, and I mix that all up. And I want to make sure that there's no clumps in either of those. And so I've already tried to make sure with my sugar that there's no clumps, but you can kind of see sometimes they get clumpy. So we want to make sure that there's no clumps. And we're going to mix this together. And right now this burner is not on, but this burner is, since I have several gallons of water heating up. And we want to make sure that that gets to boiling for when we can. Because we're going to have that water bath canner going, and we want to make sure it's nice and ready. And this won't take that long to do. So as I make sure I get all the bumps and lumps out of this, I'm going to then add my water. And so I have 9 1/3 cups water already set out. And that's one of these handy dandy sizes. So I'm going to pour this in. And as I do that, I'm going to make sure that everything in the bottom of my pan gets circulated and gets all nice and mixed in with the water. So you're going to scrape the bottom of your pan, and you're going to make sure that there's no little clumpies. You want to make sure it's all liquid. So as we scrape the bottom of the pan, we'll start to feel that it's not that it's not clumping, that it's not attached to the bottom of the pan or anything. This is where we turn on the heat for this one. Now, as I have my handy dandy matches here where I can turn on my burner, so I have this on and I hear the gas or the propane coming out real quick. So I'll light this, let it go. And since it is so dry where I am, I do have a little bit of water that I dip the tip in so that it doesn't continue to burn and I don't start any fires. So if you're going to do this outside, you can do it outside. Just be careful of your surroundings. Like I happen to have a hose by me and I've wet around where I am, so I keep the dust down and I try to reduce the risk of any potential fire, because that would not be good. So with that in mind, I stir this up a bit and I make sure that my heat is somewhat even. So now as I get this to boil, I'm going to have this boil. Now according to my directions it says add water or juice. You can add like grape juice to this instead of water. I just didn't want any extra sugar because it already has 6 cups. And it says cook on medium-high heat until it thickens. And you'll be able to see that it thickens. And I am seeing something in here that I'm wanting out. So there, I got it. So you want to make sure that things stay clean and neat, and you have things as sanitary as you can. Now, this is something that I'm doing for myself. I'm not going to be selling this commercially. I'm not going to be selling it at fairs. Those are options that you can do. If you want to sell your canned goods to people as an extra income, you can do that. And in fact, I recommend that if you find something that is something unique to you and people really like, try to sell it to people. That's a great way to earn some extra money. But I will point out there are cottage industry laws that can protect you for that. So make sure you know your cottage industry laws local to you for what you need to do. I believe in most cases you need to have, for cottage industry laws, you can cook out of your own kitchen as long as it's inspected by a USDA agent. And so you can find out your local rules and regulations on cottage industry laws and for the things that you want to make, because they are different for breads versus candy versus canned goods. So that's something that can be considered. So this is one of those things that you could potentially sell, but you'd have to have it in maybe a little more controlled environment than what I'm doing it in now. But many people do this outside, like they'll can fish outside because it just stinks up the whole house, something fierce. In fact, a friend of mine just up the road, she and her husband can in their garage and they have their garage wide open so that they can let the air go through. Plus this keeps the heat out of your home in the summer when most people are doing a lot of canning. So as we continue to wait on this, this will kind of gradually thicken. And I'm trying to keep it moving a little bit so that it doesn't stick to the bottom. We may take a moment to wait and make sure that this is good, and we'll come back to it in just a minute. Hey there, we're back as we're watching this continue to thicken. And as you watch this thicken, really watch out for it. I stepped away for a moment and it got a little bit away from me. So luckily it didn't burn or anything, but you'll see and feel it thickening. You'll see little clumps sometimes on the edge of your spatula that'll show you that it's actually working. And right now it still is rather thin. You can see it kind of rolling off my spatula. But as it thickens, you'll see little clumps, like maybe you'll see on the edge of my spatula. That means it's kind of doing its job. And I'm finding that the flame shifts a little bit on my burner here. Sometimes it's a little hotter over here, other times it's a little hotter over here. So that's why it's wise to sit and kind of watch it for a little while. And in my case, and you can kind of really see there's a nice little lump here of gel coming along. So the next step we're going to do is add lemon juice. Now, lemon juice is naturally acidic, and the method of canning that we're going to be doing today is called water bath canning. Water bath canning you can do with things that are more acidic, and things that are more acidic they're just different naturally than other things. So that's why we don't need a pressure canner today. You might use a pressure canner for things like green beans, or for potatoes, or even for meats. But that's why we're using lemon juice as our next item on our list. And so we're using actually just 1/3 of a cup of lemon juice, this natural lemon juice, to have this be in the acidity range that we need. So when we do that, that's going to be to our 6 quarts of blueberries, or 24 cups. So as we make sure that this starts to bubble, and it is starting to thicken, I'm seeing my clumps at the bottom, and I'm now continuing to stir so I can see and make sure that it's not sticking. And I am seeing some bubbles now in my pot, so that's one of the indicators that we're going to add our handy dandy lemon juice. So just our 1/3 cup of lemon juice that I'm going to stir in, and I'm going to bring this to a boil and have it boil for a full minute. Now, one thing I do have here with me is my little timer, and when I have it set at 1 minute, so I want to make sure that goes for a full 1 minute. So I'm going to put start because it is starting to now thicken a fair amount. And I don't want to have it go too far and be completely off. And right now this is actually thickening up very much. You can kind of see it's kind of clumping a little bit more. And that is kind of what we want for pie filling. And I am going to turn it down even more because I don't want it too hot. And that's actually doing its job pretty well. It's actually looking very soupy, and it's actually smelling kind of good. And as it continues to boil for the 1 minute, we only have about 10 seconds left. And then I'm going to add my blueberries. I'm just going to fold in my blueberries once this is all done. And I'm going to can. So I'm actually now going to turn off my heat completely because I don't want this to go really anymore. And And luckily I did that because my flame just went out. And I would have still had a flame going. So now I'm going to take my blueberries, my 6 quarts or 24 cups of blueberries, and I'm going to simply fold them in to my filling. Now these blueberries have been prepared by being rinsed and blanched so that everything is clean and neat. There's no stems, crossing fingers, or anything like that. In fact, there's just one that I see. Any bad or rotten ones you just want to get rid of beforehand. Because then if you have anything that goes bad, that'll go bad even more within your jars, and you don't want that. So I'm going to try to fold these in, mix them all up nice and good. And I will point out that blueberries are not actually blue on the inside. They're actually a white. And I may try to show you a picture so you can see that. Let me get the rest of my blueberries in. So the blue of the blueberries comes from the skins. And that's kind of what makes it kind of fun to see the color. Now you can also add some red and blue food coloring to this if you choose. I've chosen not to because I don't want any added stuffs. I'd rather not have any added things if I don't need to. And so I have not chosen to add food coloring or juice. This I find is really rather sweet with the sugar that we have, and I just don't feel like having extra food coloring is what I need. Now too, since I've been doing some baking and other things, doing things commercially, I do have a tendency to keep things near me to try to keep my hands a little bit clean for while I'm doing things like this. I just went and got my hands all dirty again. But as I'm making a nice mixture, I'm going to prepare to have my lids boil next on this burner. So for our water bath canning, we want to make sure that we have sterilized jars and sterilized lids. And to do that, you just simply need to boil them in water. And that is a really simple, easy thing. Some people like to sterilize their jars in their ovens, but then that heats up the house and everything. So that's why while this is heating up, I have my jars right in here, and they'll get sterilized from the steam and be all sorts of set. Now, I also have some other tools that I'll show you that'll help me get this filling in my jars a little easier. Let's get to that point. I'll continue to mix this up just so you can see how it goes, and we'll go from there. Okay, so now we've transitioned over to canning, and what we're going to do now is I have in my pot here some canning jar lids and this funnel so that I can make sure that they're all sterilized, and I have some other tools that I got that help me with canning. And just to show you some other canning items, this helps me grab things out of the water that I need to. This is for helping to actually pick up the jars. Now here's the trick on this one, guys, and I'll be honest, somebody's going to tell me. If you know, tell me in the comments below. Which way's up? I've used both ends to help pick up the jars. I have a sneaking suspicion that this is the top and this is what goes on the jar to pick it up out of the water. But yes, so that's kind of the trick on that one. And this is just something that helps you get the air bubbles out of your jars once the product is in. But it also has a cool little magnet on the end that helps us pick up our lids that I'm sterilizing and the rings. So that's what I have in here that are sterilizing. I'll let those kind of float and do their thing in there for a minute or so to allow it to sterilize. And that's why I also will use these in some cases to make sure that everything keeps as clean as possible. Because we don't want to have whatever food we use get contaminated. Now, this food should be good for at least a year. Beyond a year, we generally say, look at it. Most things are good in a container for at least a year, if not up to 6 months after that. But again, look at the USDA guidelines on those things so that you can make sure that you know exactly what's good for what. So I have my pot over here with my blueberries in it. This is just some paper towels for when I take my canning jars out and I can clean the lid. But what I'm going to do now is take out some of my canning jars, and this pie filling recipe that we have made 7 quarts. So we should have 7 quarts here in one pot that will be filled by this filling. And so we will use that in a little while. We will use these to get our jars. So here's for 1. And 2. And over here you might notice that I have a towel laying down. I was taught when I was a kid and learned how to can to put a towel down beneath, not only to help for cushioning but for heat. We want to make sure that nothing breaks, and if things start getting mixed or crossed and don't have a place to kind of cool or have a, I don't know, a soft spot, so to speak, then there can be problems. So that's why I want to make sure that my jars are kind of taken care of. Now realize that these canning jars, once they are filled and used, you can clean these and reuse them as many times as they're good for. Sometimes you'll notice that there are cracks, so that's why you always want to check the rim to make sure they're smooth and there are no cracks. If there are, don't use the jar for canning. Use another one. You can use the jar for dry goods or other things, but you probably shouldn't use it for canning. You just don't want to have any risk of broken glass. So now that we have our canning jars off to the side, and we have, now we have our funnel, okay, and I actually kind of melted it a little bit because my flame is too high. So there we go. Now I'm just going to fill each jar with my handy dandy pie filling. Now by doing it this way, it helps keep my rims nice and clean, and I will do this as quickly as I can, but one at a time. I'll also leave 1 inch of headspace from the top of my jar, and that's about to the shoulder of the jar. And that's to allow for expansion and as it cooks within the water bath. So you always want to make sure that there's, no matter what you can in these jars, 1 inch of headspace. So with that in mind, I'm getting close to that. So I want to make sure that's all settled in. I think that's enough on that one. And this is where I will use my handy dandy air puncher to kind of punch down, and I will take out some of this pie filling because it's too much. I don't have enough headspace. So now that I'm getting the edge around the lid dirty, that's where my paper towels come in. So I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to dampen it in my boiling water here, and I'm going to clean off my lid or my rim, because I want to make sure that my seal actually seals, and if there's anything around it on either side or on top, it won't seal, and that kind of defeats all the hard work of my going out and picking these and then cooking and sorting and all that. So there. And I will say that these good blueberries I did go and pick at a local farm called Blueberry Meadows. wonderful place, and I'll show you some pictures of that in just a moment when we're done canning. But if you ever get a chance to support your local agritourism, go do it. Local farmers are really an important part of our lives, and you know, we wouldn't have all the food we do without our farmers. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about Blueberry Meadows here in a moment. But I'm going to continue to fill up my jars and make sure that they're kind of all nice and fully loaded. Now too, you might notice that your pie filling is starting to kind of thicken a little bit, and that's okay. This thickens as it cools. And you can also do this particular recipe in smaller jars. If you don't think you'll use a full pint or full quart in a full pie, but you think you'll do some tarts or some other smaller things, you can use pints or quarts, or half pints, I should say, of canning jars as well. You'll just get more of them with this particular recipe. Now, when we do this, the wiser choice is to do this with poking the blueberries down with the funnel. Then you don't have to clean. So in this case, I'm all set. I will come back and clean that just because I did get a little mess on it from before. But for right now, that's good. But I'll continue to fill, and we'll get these all taken care of here in a minute. Okay, so now that I've gotten this all sorted through, went through like a bull in a china shop to get it all in there, I'm making sure my bottles have very little or no air in it, so hopefully they won't kind of bust my jars. But I've also made a little bit of a mess of my jars, so I'm going to come back and clean them again, to like take out some here because I added too much in a jar, but also to make sure that the seal can happen. And what I'll do first is just wipe all the gunk off that I can with a regular paper towel, putting it off to the side. And then I'll come back again with another one, wiping it down with some water. Because I ended up making quite a mess on this, and I don't want to have it be too off. But you might have noticed my paper towels fell on the floor. I'm going to just unwrap a stash of these because I don't want those from the ground in my jars. So I'm going to take off yet another round just to make sure, because I don't know about you, but I don't like dirt in my food. And so I'm going to make sure that these are nice and clean. I'm going to actually start up my pot again. I didn't notice that the flame had gone out. So I'm going to make sure that this gets started. And oops. And there we go. And now it's really on. I'm going to turn that down a bit. But we will see here that I do actually have a fair amount of filling left, so I can use that in tonight or tomorrow, and I'll just use that. I'll use that in the next couple of days. But this is what I'm going to be putting on my shelves. And since I put down the other paper towels on a bench, I'm just getting some more that are clean. And I want to make sure that I have the nice boiling water. And I'm going to, again, clear off any gunk on here so that I know it's all clean. I'm going to get another spot and dip it again. Go kind of jar to jar with a new clean spot. And I end up using a lot of paper towels in this process. This is the one thing I use paper towels on. and it's just, to me, it's okay because they're a little more sanitary, I guess. Now don't quote me on that one, it's just what I prefer and how I can make sure things are kind of safe. Now, in doing this, you can kind of see on your jars when they're clean or not. So you want to make sure that each one is nice and clean. And so far I have 4 that are all done, ready to go. And I will mix this up slightly to let them get a little bit more boiled on. So as I'm getting to my last few jars, I'm going to be taking the time to make sure that everything's all good. Now, when I do this, this is when I'm checking my jars for a couple of things. 1, cleanliness. 2, chips. I don't want to have any chips or cracks in my jars. Because like I mentioned before, it'll just cause problems, and you don't know if you're going to have like pieces of glass in your canned product. And as it is, there is some risk of it breaking in here. But these are brand new jars. So that's boiling, it's all done. These are brand new jars. I didn't have enough to do this, and I didn't have lids. So I ended up going and getting brand new jars. So in theory, they should be good and fine. But now, what I'm going to do is take my handy dandy little clamp, and I have my flat lid and my ring, and I'm going to take this now, get any liquid I can off there, and put it right on my jar. And I'm going to tighten it. Now I'm not going to tighten it cranked tight, it's about a medium tightness. You don't want to crank them tight, because if you do, you run the risk of it exploding. So you want to have some leeway. Now too, in the way I'm doing this, we want to make sure that there's only 1 lid per 1 ring. So in this case, 1 lid, 1 ring. So then I come to my next jar. Oops, I'm going to stick that back in. Since it touched something that I'm not sure that's really sterilized, I'll put it back in for a second and make sure. I'll put that there, get my lid or my ring, and tighten it. Now this is something we do want to do fairly quickly. We don't want to take our time and go call our friend or watch an episode of something. We want to make sure that we get this all taken care of rather quickly. And again, I'll have to re-sanitize that now that it dropped. I'll probably get this other jar or other lid. So as I'm going along, it's staying nice and clean, and I'm all sorts of excited about that. There we go. We're down to our last 3. Now our last 2. And I gotta say, this is kind of exciting. It's kind of fun, I think, to do canning and to see everything kind of come together. Now, in this next step, what we're gonna do, after I get this lid, this is where I just take this part, because that's what fell, and let that sit in the hot water for a minute. But in this next part, it's kind of where we see things come together. And when we see things come together, it's kind of fun, I think. So I got this last little lid. Put it on. And we're going to set that aside. So we're going to tighten these just so. We want to make sure they're tight enough that the seal adheres to the glass, but not so tight that it doesn't have a little wiggle room. Now I'm going to take this off the burner. We're gonna focus over here. So now that we got this all taken care of, we're gonna slowly but surely put each of these jars in our boiling water. Now here's the deal. We're gonna put one in the middle as the first one. If you do that, then it doesn't wobble. And then I have a tendency to put on either side. Do that. Either side. And I did get some on the outside. So I did get some filling on the outside of my jar, so I just want to make sure that they do get cleaned off the outside as well. And then I get my last two in. And that is what I call a full load. That's awesome. So now I'm going to put this in. And I want to make sure that this is fully covered. And right now it's not. So I'm going to be taking my water from here, since it's hot. And I will be adding some extra water so it's fully covering the top of my lids. And then I'm going to have it boil for 30 minutes and take them out. So come back and we'll see how it goes. So now we're taking the cans out of the jar, out of the water bath canner, and we might notice over here there's a bubbler, and I think that one did not end up sealing or something broke. And so this is one of the things that we got to look at in the water. You can kind of see there and over here that there's some problems. So as we just saw there, we can see that there's already a problem with my canning. So hopefully we'll be able to save some of the batch, but not all of it. So as we take out each of the jars, we can kind of see how they did. Now we're going to tilt off a little bit for the water, but I will also make sure to use my handy dandy grip and make sure they're tight, and that one is. And you may hear a pop, like tink, every so often, and that means it's sealed. You have up until 24 hours to hear that pop to know for sure that your item has sealed. If you do not, then you should press on the lid a little bit. If you feel it depress, it's not sealed. And so you can, the secret to that is that if it did not seal, I would suggest just putting it in your freezer. But if it did seal, you have a good shelf-stable item. So we're going to take these all out, and we're going to check them out to see how they sealed or not. Some of them, by what I could tell, leaked out, and that meant that I filled them a little too much. So that's something that we can work with, but sometimes when we kind of learn along the way. So with that in mind, as I go and check each of these again to make sure that one's good, that one is, and by checking them now, if they're tight, that usually means there should be a good seal. But I'm not sure, because I saw some bubbles. I'm not too sure. So that's why in this case I'll let these sit and rest just like this for up to 24 hours. That way I can see if they're sealed, I can check on them, and I may move them once just to get them inside before it's even too late or cool this evening. But otherwise they'll just be in one spot for a period of time so I can check on them to see if they seal. Alright, I'll say it. I put my jars to bed. I ended up covering them up with just something else, something light, to make sure that that they don't crack in the evening cool. Because they're still a little bit warm, I want to make sure that they cool off. See, I promise, they're really there. They gotta go to bed though. Hey there, and I'm back outside the next day after having canned, to just follow up on the canning jars. And now that I've unblanketed them from last night, this is what they look like. So I'm kind of excited. And when you test the jars to make sure that they are sealed, you make sure that you test them. If there's no bounce or give, it's sealed. And then you can take off the lid and put it on your shelf just like this. And you're going to make sure that you label them. So that always put the date and then what it is. Because sometimes things can look similar. Like blueberry pie filling can look very similar to blackberry pie filling. So just in case you want to, like if you ever want to make a pie for a friend and they're allergic to blueberries but not blackberries, and you don't label it, then you might get the wrong thing and get them sick. So now that these are all set to go on the shelf, they can do that. But I want to make sure, just again, there was one that I wasn't sure if it was actually sealed. And this is one that I wasn't sure was sealed, so I didn't label it just in case. But it seems to have sealed since last night when I did this. So thank goodness it's sealed. But I will take the lid off, or the metal piece, and this is a good space amount to have in any jar that requires that. There's one that I believe did not seal properly, and it's this one, and you can see juices got inside. So this one has all sorts of gunk around the edge. So I'm not going to leave this one on the shelf, even though the lid does feel like it's sealed. Just for safety, I'm going to actually use this within the week, because I want to make sure that I or somebody else doesn't get sick. So make sure you do that. And so the other thing I wanted to kind of make aware of is, so this is what clear gel looks like. When I got it, I got this particular bag from a local Mennonite store, and in doing a little bit of research, this is what clear gel looks like. It's not a Jell-O. It's not Knox clear Jell-O. It's a powder that you actually mix in to help make the pie filling thick. This I happen to get at a little store called Shop of Shalom, I believe, or Shop Shalom, a little store near me in Halsey, Oregon, and the people who own it are Mennonite, so they have certain specific things to their community that they use regularly. And I am so grateful that they're open to the public and have something like this, because this is just what I needed, and they were the only store local to me to have this product that I was able to use here. The other thing is, because I wasn't sure if they would have it, I did go online and buy this brand that was suggested through Amazon. So this was at just over $10. Sorry for the plane. And this was just over $8. This was $8.79. This was about $10.60. So they're roughly the same price. And this Hosier Hill brand came highly recommended through several other people. So just those are some things to know. This is the only item that you may have difficulty finding near you. So you can find it online, this brand, or you can find it through a Mennonite or Amish community store if they have one near you. So with that in mind, now that you've learned how to do pie filling, I'll attach the recipe from my local extension service, and I hope you have as much fun as I did canning these jars. So if you like this video, just click the subscribe button below, leave a comment if you have any questions or comments. I'd certainly love to hear from you. And come check us out on gyroscopefarm.com, and keep coming back to the Traveling Homesteader. We always like to have your feedback. And I hope you have a great day.